It was never true what people said about me, about retiring and stuff like that, because I've done a lot since.
K.k.Downing, born on October 27, 1951, in West Bromwich, England, is a seminal figure in heavy metal, best known as one of the founding members of Judas Priest. His groundbreaking guitar work, particularly his iconic use of the flying V guitar, helped define the band's signature sound and solidified their place in rock history. As a pivotal force behind the band's rise to international fame, Downing's contributions were integral to the creation of some of metal's most iconic albums. However, in 2011, at the peak of their success, Downing made the shocking decision to leave Judas Priest. His sudden departure, without a farewell or public explanation, has left fans and the music world with lingering questions about the reasons behind his exit and its long-lasting impact on the band. Early life, a rebellious spirit emerges. Growing up in the post-war British industrial town of West Bromwich, Downing's childhood was shaped by the harsh realities of working-class life. His parents, both laborers, worked long hours to support their family. His father, a strict and traditional man, did not tolerate rebellion or anything that deviated from the norms of working-class life. There was little space for creativity or self-expression in the Downing household, especially when it came to music. His mother had no particular interest in the arts, and thus there was little encouragement for young KK to pursue his musical inclinations. From an early age, however, Downing displayed a rebellious nature. He found himself at odds with both the rigid structure of his home life and the stringent expectations of the British educational system. By the time he was 15, the young boy was ready to break free from the conventions that seemed to stifle his spirit. In a bold and risky move, he dropped out of school with no formal qualifications and no clear direction in life. This decision marked the beginning of his journey into the world of rock and roll, a decision that would change not only his life, but the course of rock music itself. Downing, like many other youths of the time, immersed himself in the burgeoning counterculture, discovering the intoxicating world of alcohol, cannabis, and a lifestyle of parties and rebellion. He worked various odd jobs to survive, but none of them sparked any real interest or passion. His dissatisfaction with the mundane and ordinary life around him was palpable. For k.k.Downing, there was only one escape: music. The spark of inspiration. Finding his calling. The world of rock and roll presented itself to k.k.Downing as both a refuge and a calling. As he listened to groundbreaking guitarists such as Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, and the members of Cream, he became captivated by the raw energy and untamed power of the electric guitar. These artists ignited something inside him, fueling his desire to pick up a guitar and express himself through music. But it wasn't just about playing the guitar. It was about channeling the anger, frustration, and energy that had been building inside him throughout his youth. By the late 1960s, Downing had crossed paths with Ian Hill, another aspiring musician who grew up in the same working-class town. Hill, a bassist with a passion for music, became Downing's close friend and ally in his quest to form a band. Together, they started discussing the possibility of creating something new, a band that would represent not only their shared love of music, but also their dissatisfaction with the mainstream music scene. This marked the very beginning of what would later become Judas Priest. At the time, Downing was still a young guitarist, relatively inexperienced and without formal training. But what he lacked in technical skills, he made up for in determination and raw passion. He poured hours into practice, refining his craft and developing a unique style. It was an aggressive, high-energy approach that would become the signature sound of Judas Priest. His relentless drive to improve and his hunger to create something revolutionary drove him to push his abilities to their limits. He was no longer just a frustrated youth with a guitar. He was an artist on the cusp of creating something truly transformative. The birth of Judas Priest, a band of visionaries. With the formation of Judas Priest, k.k.Downing and Ian Hill found themselves in the thick of the evolving British heavy metal scene. The early days of the band were far from glamorous. The group struggled to find stability, playing in small venues and constantly searching for the right mix of members who would share their vision. With no record deal, little recognition, and meager equipment, the band's early performances were far from the polished shows that would later define their career. Yet, rather than being discouraged by these struggles, Downing saw them as a test, an opportunity to sharpen his skills and shape the band's sound. Despite the challenges, Downing was determined to create something louder, fiercer, and more unique than anything else in the music world. He was driven by a vision of heavy metal that transcended the limitations of blues rock and the music of the time. Judas Priest was destined to be something different, something more powerful. The turning point for the band came in 1973 when Rob Halford joined as the lead vocalist. Halford's powerful voice brought a new dimension to the band's music. His soaring vocals complemented Downing's blistering guitar work, and together they began to shape a sound that was unlike anything in rock at the time. With Halford's presence, Judas Priest moved away from the blues-based sound of their early years, embracing a heavier, more aggressive style that would become the hallmark of heavy metal. However, the band still faced one critical issue: a second guitarist. At this stage, Downing was the sole guitarist, and while his skills were impressive, he needed a partner to fully realize the band's vision. Enter Glenn Tipton. Tipton's arrival in 1974 completed the classic Judas Priest lineup, cementing Downing's dream of a twin guitar attack. Together, Downing and Tipton would craft some of the most iconic riffs in metal history, laying the foundation for the band's legendary status. Breaking through, Judas Priest becomes a force. With Halford's vocals and Tipton's guitar work, Judas Priest's sound transformed. The combination of Downing and Tipton's guitar harmonies, their intricate solos, and their high-energy riffs created a sound that was unmistakably heavy metal. Their music was no longer just rock with heavy guitars, it was a relentless sonic assault that would define the genre. Songs like Hell Bent for Leather and Victim of Changes set the tone for what was to come, a band that would go on to become heavy metal pioneers. Judas Priest's breakthrough came in 1976 with the release of Sad Wings of Destiny, a record that solidified the band's place in heavy metal history. Tracks like The Ripper and Genocide demonstrated the band's ability to blend melodic hooks with hard-hitting, fast-paced riffs, and Downing's aggressive guitar playing was at the forefront of this transformation. Sad Wings of Destiny was a declaration of intent, a statement that Judas Priest was here to stay, and that heavy metal was about to take center stage in the world of rock. Over the next few years, the band's popularity skyrocketed. Albums like Stained Class, 1978, and Hell Bent for Leather, 1979, cemented Judas Priest's place as one of the top heavy metal bands in the world. Their music became anthems for metal fans, and their image, down to Downing's iconic flying V guitar, became synonymous with the genre. Downing's riffs were razor-sharp, and his playing was characterized by an intensity that matched the band's hard-edged sound. By the early 1980s, Judas Priest had become a global sensation. Their 1982 album, Screaming for Vengeance, with its hit single, You've Got Another Thing Comin', marked a peak in their success. The band's sound had evolved into a more polished, yet still aggressive, form of heavy metal. Downing's influence was undeniable. His mastery of the twin guitar harmonies alongside Tipton was a defining characteristic of Judas Priest's music, and their live performances were legendary for their energy and precision. The struggles behind the glory. Internal strife and departure. Despite their success, the internal dynamics of the band began to change over the years. The pressures of constant touring, the strain of maintaining their status as metal icons, and the personal tensions between band members began to take their toll. Downing, who had always been a perfectionist and deeply committed to the band's music, found himself at odds with the increasing dysfunction within the band. In particular, the relationship between Downing and Halford became strained. Halford, known for his perfectionism and often erratic behavior, began to clash with Downing's more disciplined and controlled approach to music. The band's internal conflicts only grew worse over time, and by the early 2000s, Downing was increasingly frustrated with the direction Judas Priest was headed. The bond that had once united the members of the band seemed to be deteriorating. By 2011, after decades of shaping the band's sound and image, k.k.downing made the shocking decision to leave Judas Priest. The departure was sudden, with little explanation given at the time. It was a decision that stunned fans and left many questioning why a legendary guitarist like Downing would leave the band at the height of their success. Was it a personal decision? Or was it the result of the years of internal strife that had plagued the band? The answers remain unclear, and Downing himself has remained largely silent about the specifics of his departure. The rise of Judas Priest and the transformation of heavy metal. k.k.downing's evolution as a guitarist wasn't just about technical proficiency. It was about a visceral, aggressive style that shook the foundations of rock music. In the years following the release of Judas Priest's debut album, Rock'n'Rolla, in 1974, Downing's musical vision began to crystallize. His experimentation with sharper, faster, and more aggressive compositions was driven by an insatiable desire to forge a new sound, distinct from the blues-based rock that had dominated the era. His partnership with Glenn Tipton, who joined the band in 1974, was key in bringing this vision to life. The twin guitar attack of Downing and Tipton became the hallmark of Judas Priest's sound, setting them apart from their contemporaries. By 1977, the band was no longer a group of struggling musicians trying to find their place in a crowded music scene. They had evolved into a heavy metal powerhouse with a growing fan base. Sad Wings of Destiny, 1976, had marked their official departure from traditional blues rock, embracing a heavier, more complex sound that would define their genre. But it was the albums that followed, Stained Class, 1978, and Hell-Bent for Leather, 1979, that saw them refine their musical identity, showcasing a powerful synergy between Downing's intricate, high-speed riffs and Tipton's melodic harmonies. The breakthrough and commercial success. Judas Priest's breakout moment came in 1980 with the release of British Steel, an album widely regarded as one of the most important in heavy metal history. It was with British Steel that the band found the perfect balance between the raw aggression of their earlier work and a more accessible, mainstream sound. Tracks like Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight not only captured the essence of heavy metal, but also made it palatable to a wider audience, expanding the genre beyond its underground roots. For Downing, British Steel marked a turning point. It was the culmination of years of dedication and a refining of their sound, from the bludgeoning riffs of Rapid Fire to the anthemic sing-along qualities of You Don't Have to Be Old to Be Wise. These tracks were not only beloved by metal fans, but also gained significant radio play, helping Judas Priest achieve mainstream recognition. As the album's success solidified their place As one of the leading bands in the genre, Downing found himself at the forefront of a heavy metal revolution, alongside Rob Halford, Glenn Tipton, and bassist Ian Hill. This commercial success was further cemented with the subsequent albums Screaming for Vengeance, 1982, and Defenders of the Faith, 1984, which showcased the band's ability to evolve and refine their sound. Screaming for Vengeance in particular, with the hit single You've Got Another Thing Coming, pushed the band into the American mainstream, breaking new ground for metal in the United States. The album's energetic, guitar-driven sound was a perfect fit for the growing popularity of hard rock and heavy metal in the early 1980s. Pushing boundaries and experimentation. While Judas Priest's early years were defined by their adherence to the heavier end of rock music, by the mid-1980s, they had become known for their willingness to experiment with new sounds. Turbo, 1986, was the most controversial of these experiments, incorporating synthesizers and glam metal influences that stood in stark contrast to the band's earlier raw style. While some fans were divided by the album's poppier direction, it proved that Judas Priest was unafraid to evolve and try new things in their quest for musical relevance. After Turbo, the band returned to their heavier roots with Ram It Down, 1988, a more straightforward, thrash-infused album that reaffirmed their commitment to metal. This balance between experimentation and returning to their roots would become a recurring theme in the band's discography, with Downing at the heart of both their evolution and their musical fidelity to heavy metal. The pinnacle of metal, Painkiller and the band's ultimate masterpiece. However, it wasn't until 1990 that Judas Priest reached the peak of their musical powers. The album Painkiller would go on to define an era, becoming one of the most revered records in heavy metal history. For Downing, Painkiller was a true expression of the band's musical evolution. It was faster, more aggressive, and more technically complex than anything they had done before, with Downing and Tipton's twin guitar harmonies reaching new heights. The album's title track is often cited as one of the defining moments of heavy metal. A relentless, turbocharged anthem that combined speed, technical prowess, and melodic hooks in a way that had never been done before. The solos were virtuosic, the riffs razor-sharp, and the intensity was unparalleled. Painkiller set a new benchmark for what heavy metal could be, and Downing's contribution to the album was a defining moment in his career. He had helped create the blueprint for modern metal guitar playing, and Painkiller was his crowning achievement. The strain of success, Halford's departure, and the band's struggles. In 1992, however, just as Judas Priest seemed to reach their apex, the band faced a massive blow when Rob Halford, the iconic voice of the band, left Judas Priest. The departure of Halford was a devastating blow for the band, both musically and emotionally. His soaring vocals had been at the heart of the band's success, and his absence created a void that could not easily be filled. The band attempted to carry on with Tim "Ripper" Owens as Halford's replacement, but the magic that had defined their earlier work was never fully restored. For Downing, this period marked the beginning of his internal struggles with the band. While he continued to play and tour, he knew that something was missing. The synergy between Downing, Tipton, and Halford was what had made Judas Priest unstoppable. Without Halford, the band felt incomplete. The relationship between Downing and Tipton also began to strain, with the pressures of years of touring, recording, and constant media scrutiny taking their toll on their once tight partnership. Freedom through creative control. The formation of k.k.'s Priest. For Downing, k.k.'s Priest wasn't just a new band. It was a chance to reclaim ownership of his musical direction. After enduring years of being sidelined and ultimately ousted from Judas Priest, K.K. was determined to prove that he still had the ability to write, perform, and create music that resonated with fans and critics alike. The project's debut album, Sermons of the Sinner, 2021, was a bold statement to the world. It wasn't just an attempt to revisit the past, but to revive the raw power, intricate guitar work, and steadfast commitment to heavy metal that made Judas Priest legends. The album saw K.K. not only return to the music that had shaped his life, but also to the sound that defined a generation of metalheads. With powerful riffs and soaring solos, the music harkened back to the golden era of Judas Priest, reminiscent of the glory days of British steel and screaming for vengeance. However, despite the comparisons to his former band, Sermons of the Sinner established K.K.'s Priest as a band with a unique identity, one that didn't simply try to mimic Judas Priest, but instead embraced the spirit of the genre with a new and reinvigorated energy. A legacy unappreciated, the cold distance between Downing and Judas Priest. Though Downing has gone on to create new music and maintain a connection with his fans, one harsh truth remains. His relationship with Judas Priest has never fully healed. The cold distance between him and his former bandmates continues to this day, a situation that has left many fans feeling disillusioned. The lack of recognition for his contributions within the official history of the band is particularly glaring. For example, when Judas Priest was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2022, Downing was invited to attend, but there was no special acknowledgement or tribute to his role in the band's success. The honor of induction, which should have celebrated his contributions as one of the architects of their sound, was marred by the fact that his importance to the band seemed relegated to an afterthought. During the ceremony, Downing shared the stage briefly with his former bandmates, but the tension was palpable. The performance was short, and the disconnect between him and the band was evident. Many fans, who had long supported both Judas Priest and Downing, were angered by the omission of any meaningful recognition of his pivotal role in shaping the band's identity. To them, it seemed almost like an attempt to erase Downing's influence, even as the band continued to perform and record with a new lineup that had excluded him from its ranks. k.k.Downing's enduring influence on heavy metal. Despite the lack of official recognition from Judas Priest and the disappointment he felt regarding his departure from the band, k.k.Downing's legacy remains unshakable. His contributions to heavy metal are immeasurable. The twin guitar attack that he pioneered alongside Glenn Tipton is considered one of the defining characteristics of Judas Priest's sound. This dynamic interplay between their guitars laid the foundation for an entire generation of musicians, and it became a template for future heavy metal acts. Without Downing's work, it is impossible to imagine modern heavy metal, and bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Megadeth might never have achieved the iconic status they hold today. Beyond his technical prowess on the guitar, Downing's stage presence played a crucial role in the development of the metal persona. He was one of the first to fully embrace the image of the metal guitarist, with his long hair, flying V guitar, and aggressive stage stance. He personified the very essence of what it meant to be a heavy metal performer. His headbanging solos became a hallmark of Judas Priest's performances and served as a visual representation of the power and intensity of their music. It's no exaggeration to say that Downing's style and persona influenced countless guitarists who followed in his footsteps. k.k.Downing's place in rock history. k.k.Downing's career is a testament to both the peaks and valleys of rock stardom. As one of the founding members of Judas Priest, he played a pivotal role in shaping the band's sound, establishing them as one of the most influential heavy metal acts of all time. His distinctive guitar style, most notably the twin guitar harmonies with Glenn Tipton, became a cornerstone of Judas Priest's identity, influencing countless bands and guitarists that followed. However, despite his immense contribution to their success, Downing's departure in 2011 left fans bewildered and searching for answers. His exit marked the end of an era for Judas Priest, but his legacy lived on through his subsequent project, k.k.'s Priest. While his time with Judas Priest is over, k.k.Downing's influence endures, and his spirit remains a vital part of heavy metal's evolution. His story is one of resilience, proving that even in absence, his impact on the genre will never fade.